Thank you, Deb. Now, we all pay our share of tax and that helps keep the country running, but numerous multinational corporations have been accused of dodging their responsibility to the tune of billions of dollars. Apple, Google, the mining company Rio Tinto, they've all been grilled at this week's Senate inquiry, with more companies yet to face the heat. And for more detail and discussion on this, we're joined by Greens leader Christine Milne from Hobart. Good morning to you, Christine. And Fairfax journalist Michael West. Great to have you in the studio, Michael. Christine, you kicked off this inquiry, and what's the end game? What are you hoping to achieve?
I'm hoping that it will lead to the government being shamed into stopping protecting the big end of town and actually fixing up some of the loopholes, actually resourcing the tax office to do its job, getting more transparency so that the community can actually see the extent to which these companies are ripping us off. Because ultimately, you've got Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey saying to the community, you have to pay more with the Medicare co-payments, the attack on the pensions, students, universities, and here you find just one energy company alone, for example, sent $11 billion in 1 year to Singapore, to a low-tax jurisdiction. These big tech giants sending billions to Ireland and elsewhere, ending up in Bermuda. And even you've got News Corp taking $4.5 billion out of Australia, siphoning that off to its overseas headquarters in the US. So when are we going to get a fair return, and why shouldn't they have to pay?
Well, this is our money, Michael. You've been running hard on this story for a long, long time. I guess the bulk of us feel like the government, it's in their own interest to reclaim this tax. What's the lack of will of forcing a company like Google or Rio Tinto to actually pay their way?
Well, the government on both sides, politicians on both sides, and of course the Greens are privately very concerned about it, and they mouth the right words in public. But there doesn't seem to be the political will to do anything yet, to change the laws yet enough to stop this going on. Essentially, we are all the lifters, and these big, the most profitable companies in the world are the leaners. So
the people who can least afford it are the ones who are essentially paying for these big rich companies to not pay their weight. Senator Milne, do you have any reason that the government won't be able to change the laws? These companies are entitled to use the existing laws to their own benefit. That's what we would all do as individuals.
Well, that's the big problem here, that the big companies facilitated by the four big accounting firms like KPMG, Price Waterhouse, Ernst Young, Deloitte, etc. They use those companies, and because of their multinational structures, they move their money around. We need to change the laws and actually close down those loopholes. But we could start here in Australia. Now, we know that the 700 richest private companies in Australia, the government is rushing to exempt them from having to make their disclosures. Now, they're saying that's because, the risk of kidnapping. Well, that's rubbish. We heard in the inquiry this week that half of them, of those private companies, have got their headquarters overseas, and 2/3 of them are involved in transnational organisations to move their money around. So the government's actually protecting them from that level of disclosure to the public. Also, the big miners are using these hubs in Singapore to minimise their tax. We're trying to get the names of those corporations that are actually taking all this money offshore, because these are the ones, remember, who ran the big campaign against the mining tax, saying, we pay our taxes, why should we have to pay more? And at the same time, they were being audited by the tax office for actually avoiding tax and sending it all offshore. So we really need more exposure, more transparency. The tax office needs to actually have a culture of going after these companies rather than just settling for the lowest common denominator. Plus, the laws have to change to actually go after them.
Let's take Google as an example, because they seem impervious to criticism. They just float around the world, not paying tax in many jurisdictions. Why can't someone go harder for them?
Well, we all love the service that Google provides, but corporately, their structure here is a complete artifice. They sell advertising services to Australian businesses. In Australia, the whole operation is in Australia, but they don't deem it to be Australian. They deem this Australian business to be Singaporean for tax purposes, so every cent of their revenue from Australian customers is booked through Singapore, and then it goes off to Ireland and Bermuda and so on.
I think of the average, excuse me, the average Australian citizen paying as they earn. I think, Senator, of the small businesses. My own local small store, run by Charlie, a hard-working man, run out of town by the taxes and the paperwork that he was drowning in. How do these people respond to the news that there are billions of dollars of tax going unpaid in this country at a time when we're significantly in the hole?
Well, I think that's one of the really good things that's come out of the inquiry this week, is to really bring home to all Australians the extent to which we're all being ripped off by these large corporations, and to get the political momentum out there in the community to take it right up to the Abbott government to say, right, we want this fixed, because it simply isn't fair. It's not right that ordinary people are doing the right thing.
I'm sure we all agree with you, Senator. What
off.
can we actually do about it? What can we do about that?
Well, the first thing we have to do is, as I said, crack down on, make compliance with the existing law absolutely something we go after. Resource the tax office to do that. We heard this week that there's no specialist in the tax office on withholding tax anymore. We heard they're settling for way less than we should be getting back. Well, we want to know why, and we should have that settlement register exposed. But in terms of the transfer pricing, which is the issue around the companies and setting up their hubs all over the place, the OECD is moving on that internationally, but it's going to take years, and that's my big concern, that we will have both the Liberal and Labor parties saying, oh, let's wait for the international community, because if we act unilaterally, that will disadvantage us. The fact is, these companies are doing business in Australia, as Michael just said. They're selling their stuff in Australia right now. We ought to be able to get the tax on it, and it shouldn't be beyond us to actually work out how to do that.
And the last word from you, Michael, quickly. You've said in your reporting that you think that this inquiry is already a success in a way because we're talking about it, but, you know, substantial success. Is that coming?
That is coming, because more people are becoming aware. Tax fairness is really coming to the fore. Everybody is becoming aware of this issue now. Everybody, even the ATO and the Big Four accounting firms, admitted in this inquiry that it was a big issue. Even Google and Apple and Microsoft, they admitted. But it's a matter of the political will. So when enough people are pushing the government hard enough, they will have to act.
Michael West, Senator Milne, thank you very much for your time this morning. Deb, it's outrageous that we're all carrying the load.
Absolutely. A huge issue and a really important debate. Thank you so much for participating in it to both our guests.